Hello and welcome to Fulcrum's webinar on DevOps. We'll be focusing on the 5 ways to master continuous integration, continuous development in a DevOps mode. We have our presenters in line. We're going to give a couple of minutes for more of our attendees to come in. We definitely had a real good interest when we started campaigning for this webinar. So we're going to give a couple of minutes for all the attendees to come in, settle in. For all the attendees who have joined in already, you have the GoToMeeting console that has a couple of options as an attendee. If you're facing any connectivity issues or if you're facing any concerns with the video sharing, the screen sharing, please feel free to raise a hand or drop a question. Our team will try and figure out how to get the issues resolved for you. Second, in the process of the webinar, if there's any area where you like to take a bit of a pause and raise a question, or if there's any concern or anything that you need clarification with, please feel free to either raise a hand or drop in a question from the console. We like to make this webinar as interactive as possible, so your participation is equally, actually mostly important from that perspective. Right, then I do see a few more attendees dropping in. Why don't I begin with the introduction to the webinar? And obviously, DevOps is one of the hottest, if not the most hottest topic in the IT industry when it comes to continuous integration and continuous development, the CI/CD perspective. But you name it, any industry for that matter is looking for optimal ways to go about deploying more apps, streamlining how the development functions are working out across various platforms. The more and more business areas are demanding for active applications where the questions arise in terms of how do we manage our present IT landscape and introduce more solutions, supporting more customers, giving enhanced experience from the applications perspective. So that's where the DevOps really finds its sweet spot, and that's where the proliferation of DevOps is transpiring. Of course, with DevOps coming into the picture, one of the most crucial area that causes distractions is the profusion of DevOps related tools and processes, and the ultimate discussion between what do we focus more on? Do we focus on the DevOps process first and then opt for the tools, or would the tools do the entire job of DevOps? And if that is the case, who will manage it, and how the entire DevOps functionality would come in from the IT infrastructure standpoint, but also as an organizational standpoint. So with that being said, we have Sukhpreet Sondhi, who is our Vice President in Product Engineering. He is a big-time evangelist on modern technologies, modern optimal areas to enhance business experiences across the board. Sukhpreet has a wide experience from the consultative standpoint. He's solely responsible for designing many of our products and frameworks in the market over the past 15, 20 years. Somewhere around that, Sukhpreet, you can correct me when you get on. And from the agenda's perspective, what we will be covering would be the CI/CD benefits. Why would DevOps CI/CD be the right fit for all the organizations, if not now, then in the near future, going down all the way to where Fulcrum will give you certain value-added experiences from our end, where we call it the 5 Lighthouse principles for DevOps. And then, of course, we're also offering a jumpstart on a complimentary DevOps assessment. So over to you, Sukhpreet.
Thanks, Karan. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the webinar. Indeed, DevOps is a very hot topic, and there's a ton of information available online on what DevOps is, the benefits, and the tools. So we will be touching upon that only lightly today. And our main focus area will be what we call Fulcrum's Lighthouse Principles for DevOps. And these are some aspects of the DevOps adoption and management that we feel apply to just about everybody who is going to adopt DevOps. So you can see our agenda here on the right. We will start with just a brief introduction and then talk about some of those tools, technologies, as well as whether DevOps is right for everyone or not, some of the risks and hidden potentials. And we will see how the Lighthouse principles come across as we go through these topics, how they really fit into all of these aspects of DevOps. So let us get started. We have DevOps as almost like the de facto or default operations and development process for IT-related organizations. And some of the key aspects that we see for implementing DevOps are having close and tight integration of the different processes, having the development, the QA, and the operations teams working tightly together. And indeed, there is no clear or universally accepted definition of what DevOps is, but these are some of the fundamental aspects that most people agree upon. And the benefits it provides are that, of course, things happen at a much faster pace. You are able to have deliveries of software very fast, sometimes, like numerous times within one day, whereas earlier, we talked just about a decade ago, once in a few months used to be a big deal. At the same time, we also see benefits like improving the quality of our delivery, being more responsive to the market, and having less number of errors and failures because of the continuous integration and continuous delivery aspects of it. We catch things at a very early stage. So there are no big problems down the line which cause big failures. Now, as part of DevOps, we see that what we call CI/CD have a special place, that is continuous integration and continuous delivery. And I call continuous integration the one ring that binds them all, because that is essentially where we are having all the different processes coming in and fitting together to create a cohesive whole. So as DevOps is getting more and more market share and becoming popular, some organizations that are still on the cusp of adopting it, they have a question that, is it right for me? And well, some form of DevOps may be right for just about every organization, but it is not necessary that it is the same form of same form of DevOps, and it may not be right for an organization at a particular stage. So here we look at some of the factors that go into determining whether you should adopt DevOps and whether you should adopt DevOps now. The first one is, do you have development and operations teams? And if you do not have them, well, that is definitely a question to ask, and then why are you considering DevOps? It might still be a valid reason. And then if there are different development and operations teams, are they well aligned? We have also seen in some cases some of our clients coming to us and saying that we need DevOps. And we go in and take a look at what they're doing. And surprisingly, we tell them, you already have DevOps. And they are very surprised because they have development and operations that are very closely aligned. And this type of scenario is actually, we have seen in some of our telecommunications clients. So they need to have very high availability of systems, very responsive IT delivery, and very good service level management. So even though they are not calling it DevOps, they are doing DevOps. Similarly, if we see that the organization needs short turnaround times for development, and if they have builds or deployments that are very complex and risky, so they get scared as the time to release comes nearer, and there are a lot of measures being taken to roll back, to manage contingencies, all that contingency planning. is a very good indicator that yes, you do need DevOps. Distribute the risk, make it continuous. So there is no big event where you feel, okay, things can fail. Another factor that goes into determining when DevOps should be implemented is whether you are having some kind of mission critical systems and processes, and if there is very little room for disruption, if you do not want to disturb what is going on, then yes, it is tricky, and we might have to adopt DevOps in a phased manner. A phased manner is good anyway, but sometimes that disruption is really, it's something that cannot be borne by the business at that point of time. And another related factor is whether your budgets allow for some initial investment, and whether you really aim to reduce your operational expenditures, and you can continue taking some kind of capital expense in the beginning, or whether you do not really care about your operational expense, but you definitely want to reduce IT spend in the beginning. And finally, who doesn't want more, faster, and better? And we see that there are some organizations who feel that, yeah, what they have is really good. Faster or better is actually a risk, a change which they do not want to take at this moment. So there can be different levels of DevOps implementation we suggest in these different scenarios. But yes, there are situations in which DevOps is not the right or the best thing to go in for. And that brings us to our first principle of DevOps, the Lighthouse principles as we call them, that you need to have your objectives from DevOps defined first, because if you are thinking that, okay, there is no other alternative, we have to do it, then yes, you may be adopting DevOps, but you may be creating a problem for yourself, or you may not be utilizing it to its full potential. So what you want to do with DevOps is important. It is not like saying that, yes, I want IT. If an organization goes in for a big IT program, they definitely want to say what they need from that. So next, we take a look at some of the methodology and processes surrounding DevOps. And here we are showing a representation of what we do internally within Fulcrum, and very often working with our clients, we follow a similar process. So we can see multiple pipelines of delivery, and two very important aspects in this are the feedback loop, which gives intelligence to the whole process. And if we just look at the definition of intelligence, you will find that it's learning from experience, and that learning cannot happen if there is no feedback loop. So this is one of the core fundamentals of the process. And the second one, which we see, is the continuous process that makes it more agile. It makes sure that like the risk is distributed, as I was mentioning earlier. If we are having any process, there is no lag based on a kind of handoff between one process element to another. So if the developers are done with whatever they want to code, they can immediately check it in, and it can get built immediately. If there's any problem, it can get detected immediately. And similarly, if there is some kind of testing to be happen, the testing might be automated. The results will be available immediately. So what this continuous nature of the process does is it gives us very quick response, very short lag times, and it speeds up everything. It makes it agile, and ultimately the whole process is as optimized as we can make it. So looking at these aspects, we also see that there are multiple pipelines of delivery, and these can be structured differently in different organizations. There are also different groups that may be involved, different stages that the delivery might go through. So all of this can vary. But the feedback loop and the continuous nature, these two are what we consider the critical aspects of the process. Now, as we're talking about process, we do see that there are a lot of businesses that go in for DevOps, but they're focusing on the tools first. So this brings us to our second Lighthouse principle of DevOps, that the methodology and the process comes first before any tools and technologies. The tools and technologies, they can assist and they can enforce the processes, but you need to have them defined first. Otherwise, you might be ending up following processes that do not work well for you. So a very good example of this is where quality assurance departments and organizations, so very often they have certain gates that they implement. And once they bring in tool sets for DevOps, they do not know how to fit those quality gates into the DevOps process. So here they start compromising on the quality assurance just because the tool set is not set up to handle it. And sometimes it's a problem with the tool, sometimes it's more than likely it's a problem with the way they are set up, but they did not pay attention to the methodology and the process before adopting the tool. So next, we go to actually take a quick glimpse at some of the tools available. As you can see here, there are numerous tools, and all of these fall into different areas of the DevOps lifecycle. On the left-hand side, we start with collaboration and actual development processes. Then we have the automated builds, testing and quality assurance, and deployments, and actually running and operating the software. So here, under the deploy section towards the middle, we see some tool sets like Chef and Ansible and Puppet, and these are the ones which are referred to most often by people during discussions of DevOps, because they form the heart of the continuous integration, and they are the ones which are bringing all the different tools and processes together. So this is just to look at maybe 10 to 20% of all the important tools out there, but there are definitely numerous others. The important thing in such a profusion of tools and technologies is how do we select the right ones and what do we do with them so that we can quickly get off the ground and realize the benefits.
Sukrit, let me just pause you a little over there. We have a question from Reese Jason. The question being, what is the role of CAB in DevOps environment?
Of CI/CD?
Of a CAB.
Okay. So by CAD, are you referring to automated delivery?
I think it was in the previous slides.
Sure, let me just go back to that. Okay.
Change advisory board. Thank you, Reese.
Oh, yes. So change advisory board, very good question. Yes, it gets referred to with different names as different places, and the role within the continuous integration and continuous delivery process is to have a checkpoint at the beginning, and the change advisory board, although sometimes people also call it the change control board, they will be approving all the changes that are going in. So let me go to the slide where we have the business unit and the process starts off. So here, right in the beginning, there might be one aspect of change control which happens at the business level, where let's say you have your business users or stakeholders or product owners, and they will approve changes for implementation. And then there is also another level of change control that happens later on when we go towards the deployment. And That one comes more from the operations side. So what are the changes which are approved for releasing into the production or the live environments? And because development and operations used to be separate earlier, so very often these terminologies are a little bit confusing. And the role in both the cases, though, is to manage and control what goes into the pipeline and what comes out of the pipeline. So if you look at it in that sense, it is a very straightforward role. And we'll touch a little bit more upon this as we go ahead when we talk about governance as well.
Of course. Yeah, I guess in the governance chapter, there'll be a lot more deeper insight there. Actually, there's another question that popped in from Christopher. He says the decision makers in his company are not IT savvy. What tips would you recommend for convincing them to invest in DevOps? Either we can take it up now because this is more of a holistic question. I guess we can summarize this at the end, or Sukriti can take it up now. It's up to you.
Yes, so that's a great question. Let's do this. Let's take this one up at the end. After we have seen some of the content, this will have a little more flavor added to it. So, Karan, feel free to jump in if there are any other questions, but this particular one I would like to take at the end. And for the moment, we will resume with the toolset discussion that we were having. So here at Fulcrum, we have taken the approach that we implement the tools with a focus on simplicity and low overheads. And essentially, it is a very common sense approach that we do not want the tool itself to be the end or the goal. The tool is just a tool, so it has to get us to the objective we need, and it is not important by itself. So looking at our technical stack that supports DevOps, we see that software development happens through the various IDEs or environments used for coding and development, and then we have Git as our one of our main version control systems, although we do use others as well. And then issue tracking and overall the collaboration and methodology of agile implementation, they are enabled through the Jira platform. And then we have Jenkins for automated software builds. So that will take the code out of Git and it will use whatever check-ins have happened in Jira. So it will look at whatever items are marked as completed, take the relevant code from Git, do a build, and then send it to Sonar. So Sonar is our automated tool for measuring code quality, and that even if there is no other test defined, it can automatically do a whole bunch of tests for us on whether the code is having good quality. So it does static code analysis and it sends reports in an automated manner to all the stakeholders involved, the developers, the leads, managers. And then next we have our test suite. So most of the time it is on Selenium, Appium, although we have a few other tools as well. And this forms the next stage during our delivery pipeline. And finally, the deployments. So the whole process, including the deployments, they are automated by Puppet most of the time. And we have, of course, the alerts and monitoring happening continuously through all of this. So it is not very different conceptually from the DevOps pipeline and the DevOps process that a lot of organizations have, but it's just one example of the toolset that we can use. And of course, the focus being on simplicity and low overheads, which is in effect our Lighthouse principle number 3, that do not go in for all the different fancy tools and try to use all the different features that they provide. Indeed, it can be very compelling to see that there are a lot of automation features, there are a lot of integration options available, And we have seen in many cases businesses becoming stuck with just getting ramped up with those tools for a long time. So next, we talk about some of the risks and the hidden potential of DevOps. And here we have overheads that don't add value. So like we discussed with the tools, so we touched upon it already. And the next one is the rogue DevOps. Now that is a term which I've given to runaway processes. Typically, DevOps has been implemented without enough attention being paid to the objectives, which was our principle 1, to the methodology and processes, which was our principle 2. And what ends up happening is that we have an inefficient DevOps operation. It seems to be running very fast, delivering all the time, something is coming, but we do not have the benefits that were seen, that were originally envisioned being realized. So we'll see as we get next into the governance part of it, that how this rogue DevOps can be tamed. But then we also have hidden potential of DevOps. And the reason I call it hidden potential is it's not just efficiency and quality, which we hear all the time, but we have certain benefits in terms of engineering superior and innovative products that are typically not seen without DevOps. So one example I can give is for one of our clients, they were having a lot of problems getting logged and into the system logs, but they were not critical problems. And the DevOps team, they are looking at all these different issues and they are analyzing them so they could understand where the challenges in the current system are, and they could give feedback to the business on how to improve it. This was an ordering system, by the way, so the orders that are coming in from the customers, where they are getting stuck, where they're having challenges, and sometimes they're having errors and abandoning the process. So all of these was getting logged directly into the system logs. And this is typically not something you would expect to come from an operations team, that how they can improve the product.
Right.
But in the case of DevOps, that is something that becomes possible.
Sukrit, sorry to interrupt again. We have one more question coming in from Ketan. He says, overhead, question mark. Can we please elaborate? What do we mean by lowering overhead? I think it was from the previous slide where we had.
Yes. So even on this particular slide, we have overheads mentioned. Now the overheads are a critical part of the DevOps process and pipeline. And every time there is a handoff to a next stage in the pipeline. So let's say you go from development to QA, from QA to deployment. So there is some aspect of the overhead. And as we are calling it a continuous process, we may be doing this multiple times a day. So what happens is, if our process is not efficient, we do not see the benefits of DevOps. Let's say we have some level of manual intervention required, or if we have a lot of configuration and a lot of human involvement. Just to give an example, so if there are a lot of messages coming in from the QA part of it, which require somebody to look into what went wrong, and from the QA processes, somebody makes some adjustment and then runs the whole integration and deployment to QA or the QA process again. So this kind of scenario, we are not completing the loop. We are stopping it in between, fixing problems, starting it up again. And instead of really doing a DevOps type of implementation, we end up calling it DevOps, but we are not doing DevOps. So when the overheads become high, having a continuous process becomes very costly. And people may see DevOps as the problem rather than realizing that the overheads are very high. And once we turn them down, if we are able to integrate very efficiently, if we are able to perform QA very efficiently, so then those overheads become low and fast and reliable deliveries become enabled. So it's a broad term, overheads, but essentially it covers all kind of unnecessary activities, human intervention, etc. involved.
Great. Ketan says he got it, and he thanks you.
Cool. So going next to the round trip engineering that we were talking about. Now we can have such benefits like even changes to the architecture of an application or a system can be driven by what the operations team sees happening. They don't have to wait for somebody, some system architect sitting, in some remote place to think that, hey, we can make the system better in this manner. So in the case of DevOps, they may be able to highlight areas where the performance or the scalability of the system can be improved, and perhaps even refactoring some of the architecture can be suggested by some of the DevOps teams. And of course, ultimately that leads to innovation. So when we have business and IT closely aligned, the ideas flow both ways. And that's almost like the definition of innovation, that you have two different disciplines when they meet at the crossroads. So that's where something new originates. And instead of being a challenge, so well-managed DevOps can be the opportunity to drive you forward. So that brings us to our principle 4, which is expand the definition and scope of DevOps in your organization. So just because it is called DevOps does not mean that it remains limited to just development and operations teams. It can include various other technical and non-technical roles as well. And in fact, we sometimes use the term biz DevOps with our clients just to indicate that they are not outside that loop. They have to be tightly integrated. Another very important aspect is that these days, agile processes like Scrum, they are being implemented everywhere. And we also have DevOps being implemented. So are they similar, or are they compatible, or is it one versus the other? That's a common question that comes up. So should I follow Scrum or should I follow DevOps? And in fact, they are totally compatible. We could be having a very good Scrum cadence and integrate that into the DevOps cycle. And in that sense, sometimes we call it biz DevOps. So the loop essentially becomes bigger, but it's providing more innovation and more functionality, more releases faster. And it all has happened because the scope of DevOps is not limited only to development or operations. So similarly, we spoke about governance. That can be brought into the scope of DevOps, or rather, we should say DevOps is expanded to touch governance of IT. There is security and compliance departments. Now, they have also been incorporated in many businesses into the DevOps cycle, because how do you make sure your systems, they are secure? How do you make sure they are complying with the necessary policies and regulations? Should it be after the fact, or should you be handling it during the process? So, of course, doing it during the development process and the delivery process is better, rather than doing an audit after the fact and catching it. So security and compliance can be also brought into the same loop. Some people call that SecDevOps or DevSecOps. So there are numerous terms like that out there. So next, we look at governance that we have touched upon multiple times already. And this is, I think, one area of growing interest now. As businesses adopt DevOps, They would also like to know, how do we manage it? How do we evolve it? How do we make sure it stays on track? So for that, having a governance model which takes input from all different stakeholders across the business is very important.
There you go. That's a good one.
And as we do that, we need to make sure that all the right aspects are getting channeled at the right time. So from just looking at the governance model shown over here, we see that there is a governance committee. And on seeing this model, I've had this question come up many times, that do we need a DevOps governance committee? So no, this is not like a DevOps governance committee. It is similar to that change control board or change advisory board that was also mentioned earlier. And it should also have representation from the management of the organization. So it can be implemented a little differently depending upon how the organization is structured, how it works. But essentially, it needs representation from the business and the management as well. And below that, we see there are the leadership team, the PMO, and the operations managers. So these are essentially all the people that are running the organization. And some tools that they have in place to support them are the governance plan, periodic process reviews. There should be a repository. I see we have mentioned SharePoint here, but of course it could be any repository. Now, to get a little better idea of the impact of this governance, I'd like to share a few examples. So where we have seen lack of governance derailing the DevOps initiatives. So the first one is mentioned on the left here, which is a change in managers. When managers change, they may bring in with them knowledge of a different set of tools or a different type of process. And we see that sometimes they start encouraging bypassing the current DevOps process. So it's a new manager and they have to accomplish something in an urgent scenario, maybe deploy a fix very quickly, and they completely bypass important aspects of the process and do it manually. So that is a common thing among new adoptees of DevOps. Another very common mistake where the governance is not in place is on the right-hand side, which I call new name, same game. So this interesting one is where an organization has just started implementing DevOps, and they call what they're doing DevOps, but essentially they do nothing differently. The development team calls themselves the DevOps team, and the operations team, they also call themselves the DevOps team, and continue doing exactly what they were doing earlier. Obviously, that's not what we want. So some other common mistakes where due to lack of governance are where we see the skills to manage the DevOps platforms and tools, so they are in short supply. And if the pipeline breaks down or something happens and the right admins are not available, the whole process comes to a halt. So yes, it's a great vehicle to take the organization forward on IT delivery, but it needs its maintenance as well. And similarly, below that, we see being held hostage by the tools. So that's similar to the rogue process that I mentioned earlier, rogue DevOps, that if the process is not very well defined and what we want to do is not clear, the toolset may drive what is happening, and which is definitely what we do not want. And then the final one here on the left, which we missed, is the feedback being ignored. So that is where we have a very nice streamlined DevOps operation with multiple departments working closely together, and there's a feedback loop, but they do nothing with the feedback. And it's very surprising how often this happens. and that is one more area where the governance is not in place. So nobody is looking and seeing that, okay, if there was a change in managers or if some feedback came in, or if our admins are missing certain skills or we do not have enough admins, so how do we keep the DevOps on track? And that becomes an important aspect of the role of the governance, which is indeed our principle 5, to actively govern the DevOps program. So, having covered these 5 Lighthouse principles, we've just summarized them here for quick reference. We also are offering today to all the participants that we have a free jumpstart assessment that is available for an organization to help them through all these different steps. And it is a process that takes them through the kind of objectives they should have from their DevOps, the processes they should have, the tool set that would be a good fit for them, and we have certain ways of selecting the right tools for the different types of organizations and how they should govern. So all of this is compressed into a very short time frame, which we call jumpstart assessment. And feel free to reach out to Karan and me for any more information about that. Our contact information is given here. And with that, we will take any questions that are there from the audience. So, Karan, if you could help me with those, please. So I see we have one of the questions we had parked earlier, which is,
actually there are two questions, Sukrit. The one that came in again from Ketan was, for a fast-paced delivery, if not DevOps, then what else? How promising is DevOps future?
okay, so for a fast-paced delivery, when we say if not DevOps, then what else? My response to that would be that the DevOps definition is so broad at this stage, it is not really a very concise or cohesive definition, that it covers just about everything where there is close collaboration and developers and operations teams and others, they are having close interaction. So if we say that we do not want to do DevOps, essentially we are saying that we don't want close collaboration between the different groups involved in delivery. And my response to that would be, there's no real good alternative. For fast deliveries, the only way it can happen if we do not have DevOps is if it's the same group of people. Let's say it's a small team, a few individuals, and they do everything. So then they do not need a very formal DevOps process or tool set in place. They control and manage everything in their mind, and that would work well for them. So this is the only way I could think of if we want really fast and reliable deliveries. But of course, we'd be working with a very person-dependent approach. Suppose those individuals changed, your whole process could fall apart. Very good. So I hope that answered the question. And then we'll go on to the next one. So the one that we parked earlier was about the executives in an organization, if they're not very IT savvy. So how do we convey the message of DevOps, what its advantages and benefits are? I think in this day and age, IT has touched so many businesses, and almost all IT executives, they understand at least what IT can do for them. And the way all those benefits of IT come is by providing new ways, more automation, and these days a lot of AI and machine learning has come into the picture. So not just new and faster ways, but smarter ways as well. And these more, faster, better, as we called them earlier, is something which business leaders definitely understand. So if it is more and faster and better and at a lower cost, these are the bottom lines that we have to tie our DevOps program to. And how it will happen will vary. But of course, we spoke about continuous delivery, that makes it faster. We spoke about low overheads, that makes it at a lower cost. We spoke about close collaboration, so that makes it more market driven. And once we tie these aspects of DevOps to the business objectives and strategies, so that they'll definitely understand that. Now, the technology part of it, that's a different matter altogether. But technology definitely should not be the leading aspect of DevOps. It's what you want out of DevOps.
Got it. So Ketan is satisfied with your response, Sukrit. So maybe we can get to the question Christopher had asked in terms of how do we get the non-IT savvy decision makers sort of making that inclination towards DevOps. What should be the right approach to get these non-IT savvy decision makers go with the DevOps route?
Right. So that's the one I was just answering, Karan. Hopefully, my answer made some sense. So I was saying that we can tie whatever the benefits of DevOps are, the faster, more reliable at a lower, cost. So all these benefits of DevOps, they can be tied to the business benefits, and that's a good way to explain rather than going into the technical details of DevOps.
Yeah, turns out you did. I'm sorry. I just repeated that question. Apologies. All right, so let's wait for a few more questions if they do arise from our attendees here.
And while we are waiting for any questions that come in, so also feel free to share any suggestions that you feel are good for us to improve the content or the way the webinar went. So we're always looking for ways to make the webinar more relevant to our audience. And as the market and the DevOps practices evolve, so the way we do these webinars and our message is also continuously evolving.
Absolutely. And we've recorded this session. Obviously, we'll be sharing it with the attendees. Please feel free to share them with your colleagues. Our contact information is available right here in front of your screens. Should you need a private session on DevOps, see what we can explore together. We're offering a complimentary assessment right now for this webinar. It's the exclusive offer right now, so we can take that up as well. And second, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop us a quick email. That's sukrit@fulcrumdigital.com as well as karan.desai@fulcrumdigital.com. We'll surely get back to you as soon as we can. With that, I think, Sukrit, we can wrap it up. If there's any questions that come in, we can take it up offline one-on-one with our audience.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Have a great remainder of the day.
Thank you, Sukrit.